Diving into this material you sent on Johan Cruyff, one detail immediately jumped out at me. He literally grew up next door to Ajax's stadium.
Yeah, it's almost poetic, isn't it?
It really is. Like the roar of the crowd was just the soundtrack to his childhood.
Exactly, like it was meant to be.
And we're looking at someone who, well, you sent us material on a figure who didn't just play beautifully, but he fundamentally changed how football is understood.
He really did. A compelling origin story for sure, but his impact goes so far beyond that. He was, a genuine visionary, reimagined the whole game on and off the pitch.
Absolutely. So we've got some fascinating excerpts here. We should mention one source title is in Danish, in Sat Text. They really dig into his career, his impact, his whole philosophy.
Some really rich stuff in there.
So our mission for this deep dive, as always, is to pull out the most important insights into Cruyff's impact, make his story and influence really clear and engaging for you listening. Okay, so where does this incredible story really kick off?
Well, like you said, Amsterdam, 1947, right there, practically in the stadium's shadow.
Yeah.
And the source material, it points out his background was pretty modest, but that love for football, it started incredibly early.
Right.
But there's also a key moment mentioned tragically losing his father when he was just 12.
Oh, wow.
Young, yeah. And the text suggests that football then became, well, more than just a game. It was solace, passion, a real-life goal. He just poured himself into it.
You can almost picture that intensity, can't you? A kid dealing with loss, finding focus right there, next to the pitch.
Exactly.
And it wasn't just dedication, was it? The source says even then, his unique talent was obvious. Like his technique, his vision.
Yeah.
It was ahead of its time.
Definitely. And his movement in the text describes it really well, almost floating on the field, really light on his feet.
That kind of grace.
Yeah, that inherent quality. And when he debuted for Ajax at 17... the source makes it clear this wasn't just another kid coming through. This was the arrival of a proper star, someone who is going to change things.
And change things feels like an understatement looking at his playing style. It wasn't just speed and skill, right? The source says he read the game like few others. What does that actually mean in practice?
Well, it's about that footballing brain, isn't it? Exceptional intelligence. The text highlights this ability he had to sort of see patterns unfolding, moves ahead of everyone else.
Like seeing the future almost.
Kind of, yeah. He could anticipate where the ball was going, where the space would open up before it even happened. He wasn't just reacting, he was predicting, creating.
So less about individual dazzle, more about elevating the whole team's play.
Precisely. Which leads to that great analogy in the source, an elegant conductor in an orchestra of players.
I like that. What did that conducting look like?
It was about how he created space, not just for himself, but for teammates, knowing how to use that space, unlocking defenses with just the right pass, dictating the game's rhythm.
Knowing when to speed up, when to slow down.
Exactly. Always seemed one step ahead, guiding the team, pulling the strings.
And that conducting really came to the fore during that incredible Ajax period in the early 70s.
Oh, absolutely.
The source flags their dominance. 3 European Cups in a row, 71 to 73. That kind of success, it had to be more than just him, right? There was a system.
Exactly right. That's when total football really burst onto the scene, a revolutionary idea.
Explain that a bit. What was the core concept?
Well, the source explains it as basically erasing fixed positions. The idea was any player could and should be able to play almost anywhere on the pitch.
So defenders attacking, attackers defending.
Pretty much. It required immense flexibility, movement, tactical understanding from everyone, less about rigid roles, more about fluid interchanges and understanding space and movement collectively.
Oh, that demands a lot from players.
It really does. And the source is crystal clear. Johan Cruyff was the absolute heart of this revolution, the main man.
He wasn't just playing in the system, he was the system in a way.
He embodied it, the perfect interpreter of that intelligent, fluid style.
Which makes his move to FC Barcelona in 1973 even more fascinating. The source calls it more than just a club change. Why so significant?
Well, on one level, it was huge for Barca. The start of a new era, the text says. But it had this wider meaning, too. Remember, this was Spain under the Franco regime.
Right, a very different political climate.
Exactly. So Cruyff, arriving, he became this symbol, freedom, creativity, innovation, things that really resonated, especially in Catalonia.
So he carried this symbolic weight beyond just being a superstar player.
Definitely. And he delivered on the pitch almost instantly. The source points out, first season, he leads them to their first league title in 14 years.
14 years, that's huge. A massive impact right away.
Transformative. And there's mention of a legendary goal in El Clasico against Real Madrid that season. Apparently, it's still talked about today.
One of those iconic moments.
Yeah, moments that just cemented his status. Not just a player, but a catalyst for hope, for change at the club.
And this combination, the success, the symbolism, it led to this instant cult status in Catalonia.
Pretty much immediate, yeah. The source suggests it wasn't just the football, though. It was his whole attitude.
Okay, like what? What stood out about him?
His independence, his willingness to question things, and his directness. Very straightforward.
Not afraid to speak his mind.
Not at all. The text says he dared to challenge conventions, spoke very frankly. He was uncompromising on and off the pitch, stood by his beliefs even if they weren't popular.
You imagine that probably caused some friction sometimes.
Yeah, I'm sure it did. But it also speaks to a certain integrity, doesn't it?
Definitely. Okay, let's shift to the 1974 World Cup. The Netherlands. They didn't win, but the source says many saw them as the moral winners. Why was that?
Because that Dutch team, with Cruyff as captain, they just put on an absolute exhibition of total football for the whole world.
Right, on the biggest stage.
Yeah. The movement, the passing, the intelligence, it was mesmerizing. They lost the final, narrowly, to West Germany, but their style, so innovative, so beautiful to watch. It just captured imaginations. They played like the future.
A glimpse of what football could be.
Exactly.
And we absolutely have to talk about that moment from the tournament, the Cruyff turn. The source calls it deceptively simple, yet utterly ingenious. Break it down for us.
Right, okay. So picture Cruyff running towards the goal line, marker tight on him. He shapes like he's going to cross with the outside of his right foot.
Selling the dummy.
Totally sells it. The defender commits. Then, in one fluid motion, he drags the ball back behind his standing leg, his left leg, using the inside of his right foot.
Ah, the drag back.
And pivots, completely changing direction, leaving the defender for dead. It's the suddenness, the misdirection, pure genius, pure improvisation, copied ever since, but rarely done quite like he did it.
It's just become part of football language, hasn't it?
Yeah.
It's such a perfect example of his skill and quick thinking.
It really is.
Now, after playing, he moves into coaching. And the source makes a pretty bold claim here, suggesting this might have been his most profoundly impactful chapter, more than his playing days.
It is bold, yeah. But the argument is that as a coach, he really embedded his philosophy, made sure it would last.
Okay.
He went back to Ajax first, started implementing his ideas, bringing through young players. But the source really zeroes in on his time coaching Barcelona, starting in 1988. That's framed as the moment he fundamentally reshaped modern football.
Okay, Barcelona coach, 1988. This leads to the famous Dream Team.
Yeah,
Right.
okay.
What made that team so special, according to the material?
Well, they won Barcelona's first ever European Cup in '92, which was huge. But it was more than trophies.
Right.
It was how they played, this attacking possession-based style, all rooted in Cruyff's total football ideas. The source stresses they didn't just win, they established this really clear, influential identity for Barcelona.
A way of playing.
A philosophy, yeah. But his impact went deeper than the first team, didn't it? The source highlights his work at the academy, La Masia.
Ah, yes, the youth setup.
And this arguably is his most lasting legacy. The text says Cruyff basically rebuilt La Masia. He embedded his football DNA right into the club's foundations, how they developed young players.
Setting the stage for the future.
Totally. He laid the groundwork for those later dominant Barca sides. Think Xavi, Iniesta, Messi. They all came through that system, steeped in Cruyff's principles from day one.
It's incredible, like planting seeds for generations of success.
Exactly that.
And speaking of that influence, the source specifically points out his mentorship of Pep Guardiola. How important was that connection?
Absolutely crucial, fundamental. The text is very direct. Guardiola's ideas, his success, it's a direct line back to Cruyff.
Pep played under him.
Yeah, Guardiola was in that dream team. He soaked it all up firsthand. The source uses this as clear proof of Cruyff's ongoing influence at the very top of the game, passed down through his most famous student, you could say.
That's a powerful lineage of thought. Now, the source does keep it balanced. It acknowledges Cruyff wasn't always Mr. Popular, talks about him being uncompromising, stubborn, and fearless. How did that play out?
Well, it suggests that because he held his beliefs so strongly and wasn't afraid to challenge authority club presidents, football bodies, whoever,
Right.
it inevitably led to conflict. He'd fight for what he thought was right for the game, even if it made him unpopular or meant standing alone.
So principles over popularity, basically.
That seems to be the picture. The source puts it nicely. For him, football was not solely about achieving results. It was fundamentally about the underlying ideas, the aesthetic style of play, and a certain ethical approach.
That sums it up well. It wasn't just about winning.
No, the how mattered just as much. Playing with intelligence, creativity, integrity, that was core Cruyff.
And then, the source reminds us, sadly, of his passing in 2016. The global reaction showed what he meant, didn't it?
It really did. A huge outpouring. As the text says, it wasn't just losing a great player and coach, but someone who genuinely shaped our very understanding of football.
Yeah.
And the conclusion is that his ideas are very much alive. You see them in how Barcelona and Ajax still try to play. You see them clearly in Guardiola's teams and in countless coaches and players inspired by him.
And it comes back to that famous quote, doesn't it? Football is simple. It is just difficult to play simple.
That's the essence of it.
The source suggests his genius was making the difficult look easy, teaching us that football isn't just physical, it's thought, philosophy, maybe even a way of life.
A truly massive, multi-layered legacy,
Right.
still shaping the game today.
Absolutely. So just to wrap up the key takeaways for everyone listening, we've really dug into Johan Cruyff's revolutionary approach, both as a player redefining intelligence on the pitch and as a coach embedding a philosophy that lasts.
Total football, his impact at Barcelona, both the Dream Team and La Masia.
Exactly. And how his ideas ripple outwards, still influencing the global game. Hopefully, this deep dive gives you a really solid grasp of his incredible impact.
Which leaves us with maybe a final thought for you to mull over. Given Cruyff's focus on simple yet deeply intelligent play, how could that principle, finding elegance and effectiveness in simplicity, how might that apply outside football to other complex fields or maybe even just, our everyday lives?
That's interesting, finding the simple path through complexity.
Something to think about.
Definitely something to chew on. Well, thank you for bringing these sources to us. It's been absolutely fascinating diving into the world of Johan Cruyff with you.